Now, Paul understood the transforming power of focused thinking. He instructed believers, again, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Again, the Greek word metamorphoō here refers to an inner change that manifests in outward conduct, and it begins by replacing worldly thought patterns with divine truth. Paul instructed the Christians at Philippi, saying, be anxious for nothing. Now, you can't just simply give the negative command. You have to put something in the place of that. He says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. And it's with prayer that we come to God. And supplication, the word itself, supplication, refers to seeking supply. We're asking the Lord to meet a need. We're asking Him to supply something for us. But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And notice what he says in verse 7, and that the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and what? And your minds in Christ Jesus. I want to jump down to verse 11. This wasn't in my notes here, but I want to show you something. In verse 11 and 12, Paul says, not that I speak from want. Notice he says, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. This is something Paul learned. In verse 12, he says, I know. Here he's speaking about something within his mind. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. But this was something that he learned, that he come to know. And again, this speaks again to the intellect. Paul says in Philippians 4:8, he says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, notice, dwell on these things. Dwell on these things. And again, this becomes intentional. About 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I used to be somewhat of a news junkie, radio, television, watching stuff. And I was internalizing so much news about the world and what's going on. Of course, you know how the news is. Their philosophy is if it bleeds, it leads. And so, you know, it's about the shock factor and eyes and ears and, you know, ratings and selling, advertisement and whatnot. But I was internalizing this over a period of time. And I remember my wife and I were watching the news one night, and it was going to news break, and the anchor said, well, don't change the channel. We'll be back in just a moment with the news you need to know. And of course, I hit the mute button, and I thought, well, Mr. Newsman, that's interesting, but how did you become the arbiter or the determiner of news that I need to know? And then I thought, well, what constitutes news I need to know? And for me, I boiled it down to news over which there is actionable data. That I can take that, like the weather. I mean, I know how to dress. I know whether to put on business shorts for the day or put on my rain hat. I know what to expect. But I wound up taking Philippians 4:8 and really applying it to a lot of the information that was coming my way. And he says, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. Well, needless to say, I wound up not watching the news. And within a matter of a few weeks, my soul was so much at rest, just simply because it was not being overwhelmed. I was reading a research article recently that 100 years ago, the average American citizen made between 150 decisions a day. Today, it's over 2,000 decisions per day. And that's because we are bombarded with phones and television and internet and just all this chatter. And we're constantly confronted. And I think that the human body can be overloaded with this amount of information. And I think that we can suffer basically a shutdown in our system because we can just overload our system. Now, by shifting their focus from anxiety to intentional prayer, thanksgiving, and biblical thinking, believers would experience peace and maintain mental stability.